Good evening, treasure seekers. This is Blake coming to you live from New Mexico, and joining me as always from Washington State, it's Bryn and Cody. How's it going, guys?
Good evening. This episode is going to be what Cody says is a banger. I'm excited.
I
I
said
don't.
banger.
Oh,
I don't
Blake
say
said it's going to
banger.
be a banger.
Cody said something else. It wasn't so hip as me.
I'm not
Kids,
not nearly
kids
as
with
hip.
wearing
Even
lightning bolts.
even though
Cool.
I'm the older guy according to K Pro.
Accurate.
uh,
Yeah, that's true. All right.
so much older. I got a new microphone. Pretty excited about that. But the uh, the advantage is it's supposed to sound better. The disadvantage is I have to keep my head perfectly still for it to pick
Yeah.
up correctly.
Don't move and don't blink so we get a good screenshot for the episode.
Yeah. A peek behind the curtain.
All right. So, yeah, put all your complaints or compliments to Cody in the chat or in the YouTube comments, I guess. All right. This is There's Treasure Inside, the unofficial podcast. We're going to be covering chapter 10 today of the book. But first, let us get into our normal segments, starting with news. So, actually, I would consider this a fairly important piece of news today. There has been reports that somebody is messing with open maps, which a lot of people use for hiking, is my understanding. And there's been some nefarious user that has been changing maps on open maps. Is that the right name of it, Cody? Do you think open maps?
I think so. And the reason it's such a problem is because it's used as like a base map for a lot of other trail sites.
Yes, Open Source Maps is the name of the website. Open Source Maps. So somebody has been going into open source maps and editing them so that they have landmarks or even changing, I think, the path of some of the trails so that they match up with the pattern of the Appalachian Trail box treasure. And there's a couple of spots, both in the Great Smoky National Park, as well as one more site. Let me see if I can find it here. Harriman State Park, that have been edited in the past few days to be incorrect. And I think it's an attempt to get people off the right track because they're adding certain clues or certain names that match up with that Appalachian Trail map, and in an attempt to throw people off. And particularly with the Great Smoky National Park, there is discussion that is causing potentially a dangerous situation because that area, I guess, maybe has drop-offs or cliffs that the map might lead you to. So for all of the listeners out there, and spread the word if you're on other Discord channels as well, make sure to let it be known that this is happening. It's supposed to be updated and reverted back to the original changes in a day or two. So hopefully it'll get fixed pretty soon, maybe before you hear this even. But just be aware that there are some nefarious activities happening with this treasure hunt. So a good reminder for everybody to be aware. Don't always trust everything on the internet, especially if it's an editable source.
Yeah, and I think even if it gets resolved, this instance, I think I've heard the user's been blocked, but I think it's fair to assume if someone cares enough to do that, they'll probably create another account and potentially do it again. So yeah, beware.
Yeah, supposedly there's discussion that that user's account got hacked. We don't know the full story. Obviously, this is all hearsay, but certainly there was editing of those maps to be incorrect and to throw people off and get people excited about certain locations that it might fit that Appalachian Trail solve a bit closer. So that is a pretty serious piece of news, I would say, just because it is causing potential danger. So we wanted to put that at the forefront of the news segment today. All right. Horseshoes and hand grenades. Bryn.
The sound is as sad as I feel about my horseshoes and hand
Oh, I'm
grenades right
sorry.
now. Okay, my horseshoes and hand grenades may be more of just a plea for help. So I think, I don't know how many episodes ago now at this point, I said that the outlines around the pictures and some of the books I was going to kind of play off as a coincidence of the day. I quickly rallied back and decided that they're just too distinct and prominent to be a coincidence, and I think there has to be some tie to them. So I revisited it, and it quickly became my whole identity for far too long. Yeah, I don't know. Just I guess to start out, if you want to pull up my first picture, Blake, of like all the tracings on the island, I think my first mistake here was I was like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline all the different distinct borders in the book. And then I'm going to try to categorize them because as you go through, you realize, okay, well, some are like a clean outline where it's just the picture with a distinct cut in it. Others have a border and then there's a cut in it. And so I was trying to like categorize how these could all be maybe relevant to each other. So my first mistake was using tracing paper to nicely outline all of these, which admittedly started out more precise than it ended, which could have been part of the problem. But my idea was, okay, once I have all these traced, I can start to try to put the outlines together like a puzzle, and maybe figure out what that negative space is, thinking originally I thought, well, is it a mountain range? And then I thought, well, no, maybe they kind of create an enclosed shape. So maybe that could be a body of water, something else along those lines. And I found out pretty soon, like my lines aren't precise enough to the precision that I need to figure out how this certain outlines could connect to each other because so many of them could connect to each other if you're not looking at like the exact outline itself, where the line ends. So I kind of got discouraged there. And then I was looking at these shapes and I'm like, well, at first, this first one you see in the corner, I'm like, oh, even Blake said this, like maybe New Mexico. So I kind of thought states, and no, it's just way too rough to be states. So I was trying to think through what else could kind of be a situation of three sides, in most instances being flat, level, and then one jagged edge. And so I thought counties. And so if you want to pull up my next picture, this was ultimately, and I have not looked at every county in the United States, but I looked at kind of like the hot states in discussion. So Colorado was one that I wanted to look at. And I got very excited for a second here, thinking that this outline could potentially be Boulder County. But I think while there is similarities, actually, I've seen this again for the first time. It is pretty good. It is pretty good. But I think if this is what those outlines are, it would have to be exact. And it's not exact, unfortunately. So that being said, I kind of put pause on the county idea. What I did go through is we have a scanned copy of the book, so I just took like screenshots of all the images digitally and then kind of made them semi-transparent in a document. So I could then precisely overlay them on each other. And wow, have I wasted so much time. Well, maybe it's not a waste, but oh my gosh, so much time trying to overlap these pictures. And it's just like, I don't know, the precision that you need. I think there's just too much variable. So for this time being, I have kind of set it aside, and I do think there's something to these. I think it's crazy that there wouldn't be. But I've set it aside either just for when I have some, I don't know, renewed energy for the task, or if I feel really good about a location and a solve, maybe I can look back and see, okay, do these shapes now fit some geographical feature of the solve and kind of go that way rather than try to make it something that could be anything in the United States. Yeah. So if you have any leads, you don't have to tell me the answer. or if you have found something interesting, you just tell me, right into the mailbag and just tell me if it does result in something. Then I will feel more enthusiastic about pursuing my outlines. But for now, I cannot go on.
All right, that's super helpful. I've got one question, one comment, and I'll do
Yes.
my comment first, and then it sounded like Cody had something, and then I'll do my question last. Comment: you had mentioned that the scales are different, even though some of the outlines of the pictures are the same. So the first
Hmm.
example that we saw with like the New Mexico shaped state, we could see there's like 3 different sizes of that same outline in the book. So that adds an extra layer of complexity to what you're doing, I think, because you don't know necessarily how to scale them if you take them
Right.
straight from the book. Or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's well, that's so. I mean, I won't get into the specific details, but that's the main problem is I can't identify what the rules are. And I feel like if I don't know what the rules are of what I'm trying to do, it's just taking up too much time going around in circles. So yeah, like you're saying, there's multiple outlines used, various times throughout the books at different scales. Which scale do I use? Am I supposed to match similar scales to similar scales and disregard the other 2 scales of that same shape? Do I use one outline side of one scaled image and then on a different scale, I'm supposed to use another side of the outline? So it's just too unknown.
Cody, you had a comment?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. I just wanted to reiterate something that you actually did say, but you skimmed over it pretty quickly. And I'd like to kind of draw more attention to it because it's probably my favorite thing that I saw that you were doing with those shapes. And that is where you took 2 or 3 of those jagged edges and we're lining them up to try and make them into a lake. You said a lake or a mountain range, but the lake's the one that really intrigued me
Hmm.
because that seemed
Yeah.
like generally roughly the right kind of tolerances to where it would actually make the shape of a lake that would be identifiable or recognizable. Um, so yeah, you like I said, you did mention that, but I just wanted to you touched on it real quickly, and I wanted to kind of draw more attention to that because I
Yeah.
thought that was of all the things we tried, I thought that was kind of the one that was most impactful to me and that I liked the most.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess that's where I've landed at this point of what I think is most realistic of what it might actually be is a body of water. And then so that's my other thoughts like, well, is this a single body of water or do they combine to make multiple bodies of water like Land of Great Lakes or something like that? There's just yeah, too much, but body of water does seem the most realistic.
so you've done a ton of work to hand trace some of those things. Are you gonna not worry about that and use the digital version now, or if you do
I'm gonna
pursue
keep
it again?
them. I'm gonna keep them because I think there could be benefit to having like the original scales of all of them available. But I think if it comes down to lining up the precise corners with each other, that has to be exact because if you're not exact, they all can fit together in every way. So I
All
will
right.
hold on to them for now.
All right. My question is going back to that USA Today article that came out about a week ago. One of the quotes in there was about a certain gentleman that used part of that picture outline for a solve in Arkansas, I believe. Did you try to reproduce that and figure out what they were talking about there?
I looked up, I was pleased to hear that someone else was taking the county approach. So I looked up the county. It didn't look close to an outline that I could find. So I don't know if it was maybe a misprint on the county or if I am not thinking about the outlines abstractly enough,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe I'm just missing something altogether. But yeah, I wasn't able to find a great connection with what was published in that article.
Okay, cool. All right. Anything else about traces or outlines? You heard Bryn's plea for help from the listeners. If anybody else has a hint or has had success with that approach, we'd love to hear it. If you want to share it publicly, let us know in the email. If you want to share it, keep it confidential, that's fine too. But the email address is tips.tti unofficialpodcast@gmail.com. All right. Cool. That's a lot of work. I would quote chapter 5 in Jon Collins-Black's book, An Exercise in Faith. So
So many times I would just was like, forget it. I would just spend my time elsewhere. And then I think of Blake and all the time he spent with the zeros of the word search. And
yeah.
I was
Yeah.
inspired to continue on. And I will eventually, I'm sure, come back to it.
And the Playfair cipher till 4 in the morning.
Yeah. Yuck.
All right. All right. Should we dive into the mailbag?
Mailbag, mailbag, mailbag. We've got mail.
All right.
I love it.
We have quite a bit of backlog in the mailbag. The tips are coming in waves right now, so we're super excited about that. We're not planning on keeping any of those to ourselves unless they're specified as, confidential, or the person doesn't want us to share it. We will respect that, obviously. The first note of the mailbag today is that new mailbag sound effect. So thanks very, very much to Rashawn for sending that in. We got that new sound effect from him that he was willing to let us use on the podcast. So super. Thanks, Rashawn. I'm going to do 3 more mailbags today just to start digging out of this backlog, I would say. A couple of them are quick. One is a little bit longer. The first one comes to us from Lewis. He said he was able to snag a version of the Kindle ebook when it first came out. It has since been, I guess, removed from the Kindle bookstore, and he said that it was basically unreadable. The resolution was super poor, and you couldn't really zoom in or anything. So yeah, we did not get our hands on the Kindle ebook when it first came out, so we were kind of just speculating what the problems were with it, and so Lewis cleared that up with us with his email. So thanks, Lewis, for that tip. Super helpful, and it makes sense why it was removed if it's basically, quote unquote, basically unreadable. So that's not good quality. Obviously not what JCB had in mind probably when releasing the ebook. The second question came in from Pamela. She was wondering about how the boxes are actually going to be found protected, let's say, out in the environment. So she asked, how do you think Jon was able to secure the 5 boxes outside without them being buried or needing any special tools for the finder to retrieve them? Keep in mind that the hiding spots would need to be able to withstand any type of weather conditions for possibly years to come. So I think that's a great question. We don't have the answers to that, I would say, but we have some speculation. And there has been some speculation based on a picture that was released by JCB in, I don't know when exactly, the past few months, that I believe were associated with maybe a German interview that he was doing. Anyway, we've been talking about this quite a bit and speculating that maybe the boxes are within another box, like a protective box, potentially a pelican case, which is like a black plastic container that potentially the boxes could fit inside and then be protected from the elements. And the reason the pelican case has come up is because, as I mentioned, there is a picture of JCB in, I don't know, it looked like a studio at his house. And in the far, far background, there is a little pelican case black box that you can kind of see in the background of that picture. So a lot of people have grabbed onto that and said, ooh, maybe that's what the boxes are in. It's a pelican case. I've seen other speculation that maybe they're camouflaged pattern pelican cases even, to make them a little bit harder to find as well. So that's an open question. So thanks for that question from Pamela. We don't have the answers, but this is the speculation that I've heard from people on Reddit and people on Discord mainly. Do you guys have thoughts on how else you might protect some of these treasure boxes?
I think I immediately assumed pelican case, like you said. My only thought on that is I know that included in the treasure is some like the Michael Jordan card and Pokemon cards that are like graded. And those, you're obviously going to want to not expose those to any moisture whatsoever, or I'm guessing like even temperature fluctuations, or at least extreme temperature fluctuations. So kind of also leads into the conversation that I've been hearing about, like, is there a possibility that part of the reason that he would know that you found the treasure is because you need to contact him and pick up some other items separately? So that's something else I've heard thrown around. But yeah, my gut thought immediately was Pelican case.
All right. Cool. All right. Third mailbag of the day. Keep them coming, folks. We're really enjoying this. This one is from Alex. He had brought up the fact that page 90 is missing, as we talked about in our last episode, in There's Treasure Inside. And page 90 is important because JCB has not released a correction, nor has the ebook or later versions, later printings of the book corrected that page 90 is missing as an accident or a printing error. Alex speculates that 90 might have to do with I have to think about this, a longitude. And that 90 degrees west or negative 90, depending on the system that you're looking at, corresponds directly with St. Louis, the city of St. Louis in Missouri. I particularly like that because if you think minus 90 degrees, the page 90 missing would correspond to minus 90, right? That would be one way to think about that. I've been having a little bit of back and forth with Alex on the email account, and we've come up with a few more things that associate with that. Alex mentioned that St. Louis was the spot of the World's Fair in 1904 that Amelia Earhart actually attended from that chapter of the book. And so that is an interesting coincidence, maybe, or it's part of a solve, potentially. I actually got back to him and thought about the Amelia Earhart episode or chapter a bit more, thinking of other famous transatlantic flights, and you could consider Charles Lindbergh. And his plane was the Spirit of St. Louis. So now we have 3 different connections to St. Louis potentially. And then he got back to me again, and he said that the 1904 Olympics were also in St. Louis. And there is a chapter about the Olympics, obviously, in the book. And so now there's a 4th connection to St. Louis. So pin that one in the back of your mind.
Flights.
Don't book your flights yet. But that would be in the spirit of Amelia Earhart, certainly. But let's put a pin in that one and see if it rears its head again. I thought those were 4 really interesting connections, and honestly, that was my favorite solve, quote unquote, for the page 90 missing so far. I really liked that. So many thanks to Alex for having a little bit of back and forth on the email, the mailbag address. So comments, thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think the negative aspect of it is really strong.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it seems very clever. And just, yeah, the connections also seem undeniable. So like you said, excited to see how we can continue that connection.
All right. So yeah, excellent mailbags. Thanks to everybody that's writing in. As I said previously, we will be sharing all of these mailbag tips. We're not going to just hoard them for ourselves, as one person may have mentioned in the YouTube comments, that we're just trying to harvest ideas from people. It's not the case. We're trying to share ideas amongst the community. So, cool. Let us get into Discord detectives. Cody, you got Discord detectives today.
You betcha. All right. So I came across this conversation that really caught my eye in the Mysterious Writings Discord, which I don't believe that we've mentioned yet in the podcast, but that's another Discord that's, I guess the term would be like open to the public, one that you can kind of automatically join. And they're also covering the treasure inside treasure hunt. So feel free to join that one as well. This was a conversation between a user, the username DEBMC, and then like the Mysterious Writings main host person, which had just like a MW for Mysterious Writings, I assume, username. Anyway, they were talking about plane zones. So in chapter 2, the 100 gold rings of Nuyet, there were multiple references to kind of flight and planes and whatnot. This was the chapter that we talked about having the 36,000 foot view text in there. He also mentioned in that chapter, I don't think we caught this, he says as part of one of his descriptions, it says he was flying by the seat of his pants. So there's another one. In the Mysterious Writings Discord, the user also mentioned that he talks about a middle row, which I went back to the book and saw that, and that's kind of a little bit of a stretch in my mind, but there is a middle row reference. And then, of course, the chapter subtitle is Winging It. So a lot of references to planes and flying. And so what they were talking about was the state plane coordinate system, which I was not familiar with. And it sounds like it's not something that a lot of people are familiar with. But it's basically like a grid system that separates the continental United States up into 108 different zones. And then one of the reasons that it's really useful, I mean, for, I guess, aviation, but then also potentially for using it for a solve, is that it uses, I guess the term here is simple Cartesian coordinates instead of complex spherical coordinate system. So it should be a lot simpler. You need less complex data input to pinpoint, one of those 108 regions in the United States, in the continental United States. So I was excited by that. I thought that like there's a lot of references that would lead you down that path. I think it was a good potential solve, and it seemed like, especially for like chapter 2, it seemed like a good amount of narrowing down to where you wouldn't expect him to narrow it down to a single point by chapter 2, but kind of establishing a way of narrowing down a location to 1/100th of the United States and kind of a more specific area without getting too specific. So I did some looking into it. I had some trouble, and I'm still having some trouble figuring out exactly what the naming conventions are for this coordinate system. So at this point, I'm like 80% sure. Well, I think it's both, but I'm 80% sure that each of these zones can be described with a 4-digit number. So I think Washington was like 4001 through 4006 or something like that. But they also seem to have like names where it's like, if there's, I don't remember how many zones were in Washington, but say there's 4 zones. It was like Wash 1, Wash 2, Wash 3, Wash 4, and then for each one. So I was having a tough time figuring out exactly what the formal naming conventions are. Maybe it's both of those and they're used interchangeably. I'm not sure. Feel free to write into the email address if you know more about state plane coordinate systems than I do. But yeah, I thought it was a good potential clue within that chapter. And then I think also taking a step back, something else it made me think of is, if that is what you're meant to find, and the subtitle of the chapter is "Don't Wing It."
Yeah.
It seems like that subtitle would like be directly pointing you towards what you're supposed to find within the chapter. And I can't remember for the life of me where I originally heard this, but I seem to remember there being like an interview or something where JCB specifically brought attention to the subtitles and said like these are important. I just can't for the life of me remember exactly where that's from, but I have it in the back of my head that he had said those are important. So kind of 2 takeaways from it. I could look into the state plane coordinate system idea directly, and I'm also kind of keeping an eye out for these subtitles. Are they clues about clues? Are they like a key to how you should be looking for clues or searching for clues in each of the chapters? Thoughts?
I'm really just confirming what you said. I mean, I think the spot in the book being chapter 2, that would be an approach that makes sense at that point in the journey of trying to like sequentially narrow down where this could be. And I will also just add that more recently, I've been trying to be very intentional about how I'm thinking about those, like the subtitles as well, because they do seem, in some cases, a little funky. I mean, obviously they're intentional, but like to what degree? So I've been keeping a close eye on those too.
Yeah, no, I'd be interested to hear a little bit more once you determine what these codes actually are, and maybe just get a list of them, the numbers and the letter versions of these, and do a little bit more digging onto if this is a commonly used mechanism or if it's outdated or what. But that's a really great find. And I'm excited to learn a little bit more about that, just so I can be on the lookout for a few more hints within the book if that does come to fruition.
So to follow up on what you're saying there, take this with a huge grain of salt because it's just based off my memory from a couple days ago. And I was looking into this. I've looked into it a lot since then. And there's like the bottom of the Wikipedia page on it. But I believe it's a commonly used system that has been revamped a number of times. And I want to say, like, again, huge grain of salt. I want to say like 2012, it was revamped again. And that may be why I'm kind of seem to be getting different answers on like standard naming conventions, just because it's been redone.
Okay.
But it does seem like it's fairly well known within the whatever you'd want to call it, aviation community here.
Yeah. That's the correct terminology. Okay, awesome. I like that very much. Cool. Let us move into coincidence of the day. Cody, you're leading this one as well. You're hot tonight.
Back to back Cody topics. All right. Yeah. So this one is well, I'll tell you what it is. It's the Dancing Men cipher. So I got to this one doing the word search. I was looking at the word search. We got to the point where we were talking about kind of utilizing basic ciphers, and that one of the potential solutions or solves for that word search is that he's directing you to use basic ciphers. So I was thinking, okay, I'm looking for the basic ciphers. I feel like if it was one of these normal basic ciphers, someone would have got it by now. So I'm going to look for ciphers that are simple still, but kind of lesser known. So I was looking into a bunch of those, again, for the word search specifically, and came across one from, where's my notes here? One of the Sherlock Holmes stories by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, called The Adventure of the Dancing Men. And this is a cipher that immediately caught my eye because it's a cipher made up of basically characters, a stick figure character whose limbs are in different positions, and it's just a substitution cipher where his limbs being in different positions indicate what letter it's supposed to be. And in the book, Sherlock Holmes uses, his method of letter frequency, or in this case, like stickman orientation frequency, to decipher this cryptogram. But what I got really excited about is it immediately made me think of the Chapter 5 Masterworks by Art Smith. The picture where there's like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that, models in different positions with like arms facing different ways. So I got really excited, and I was like, this is for sure what that is. And it's one letter for one position. So it would have spelled like a nice little like 6, 7, 8 letter word that would have been a clue. And I thought for sure I had it. So I went in there, looked at it, and unfortunately it's like, it's close, but it's just the figures in the photo in Chapter 5, their limb position just doesn't match up correctly with the letters. So it was a swing and a miss, but it was one that was a coincidence of the day, and that I was really excited about for a nice sweet couple minutes there.
Yeah,
I mean, I wonder if you can take, like, if that's maybe a step in the direction of how to solve this, because it does seem like a great connection. I think there is an additional layer of the placement of the jewelry that these stick figures are wearing and the color of them. Like, for instance, there's only one green bracelet. So I think, yes, it could be a coincidence, but also it could just be one layer of how to solve that photo.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe it's like maybe finding that cipher is something he means for the reader to do, and that's supposed to kind of encourage you and not discourage you like it discouraged me, and kind of lead you to coming up with your own similar decryption
Yeah.
method.
Yeah, it could just be, a nod of, yes, you are on the right path of using this picture to find a message.
You're much more of an optimist than I am. I saw it and I was like, dang it, it doesn't
Yes.
fit. On to the next thing.
So
Yes,
yeah,
that's the
I'm
photo there.
showing the photo right now. Looking at it now, it's on page 61. I could see how this could be problematic because some of the figures more in the background are like even more abstract and don't even have arms really that you can discern. So that seems problematic to me. But I like the direction that you're going with this. Right.
Could, like, I mean, this is me just trying to, I have not seen what you've seen about this, but like, could the directions of the lines of the necklace, could that be the arms in this situation or something like that? Or like the connecting lines between the arms. I don't know. I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Just don't make that work. But I have not obviously looked into what you have, Cody. So I need to take a deeper dive.
Cool. Interesting coincidence. We'll see if it turns into anything beyond the coincidence. But yeah, really good find. Thanks, Cody. All right, I think that's completes our normal segments for the day. Should we dive into chapter 10, Jackie Onassis's Diamond Sapphire Brooch?
Perfect.
You guys ready? All right.
Ready.
So this is chapter 10, and the subtext is Welcome the Good and the Bad. And this chapter has two quotes associated with it. First one is, Man never made any material as resilient as the human spirit, by Bernard Williams. And the second quote is, Indeed, this life is a test. It is a test of many things, of our convictions and priorities, our faith and our faithfulness, our patience and our resilience, and in the end, our ultimate desires. And that is a quote from Sherry L. Dew. Did you guys do your research and look up who these people were? Who wants to give
I'll
it away?
let Cody do it because I kind of just piggybacked on what he found.
Okay.
The second one is a prominent Latter-day Saint woman.
Yes, she's also the CEO of Deseret Books, a publishing company.
That's right.
That is Sherry L. Dew. And then Bernard Williams is a English philosopher that ended up, I think he was at Cal Berkeley, where he was doing some professorship near the end of his career, but originally from England. English philosopher. All right, let's dive into the text. So we start with a Jon Collins-Black vignette. He described himself as a competitive child, and he describes a situation when he was 11 years old where he felt like he lost his team, his football team, a playoff game, and was fairly inconsolable after the end of that game. And he describes an interaction with his father, where his father kind of gave him a pep talk about taking the bad with the good, and he says it's not about when things happen, or it's not about what things happen, it's how you respond. And so there's more to that quote too. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically he says he remembers that particular interaction with his father like it happened last week. So it was integrated into his memory. He still thinks about it quite often. JCB also mentions that he has a single tattoo, that it is written in Sanskrit, which is a classical language of India and the sacred language of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. Obviously, we've seen a lot of references to Hinduism and Buddhism in previous chapters as well. And that tattoo he has roughly translates into, "I welcome the good with the bad, as they both come from one true source." So a little inside look into JCB and some of his philosophy, I would say, comes through in this chapter. His dad was teaching him basically about resilience in this vignette. And then we dive into one of the treasures that's in one of the treasure boxes, which is Jackie Onassis's diamond sapphire brooch. He mentions, JCB mentions that this was his father's favorite piece of treasure, and he questioned JCB if he would really rather keep it for himself. So interesting interaction with his father on this one. It's obviously his dad's favorite piece of treasure within this hunt. And then we dive into interesting history, I would say, of Jackie Onassis. JCB notes that a legacy like Jackie Onassis's can be accompanied by misconceptions, as public lives are often viewed through the media. And that doesn't always represent a clear view of reality. And so JCB is kind of working to dive into Jackie Onassis's history a bit more than maybe what just the media portrayed in this chapter. Jackie Onassis was known for her fashion and design choices and held a wide influence in fashion during her time as First Lady. So Jackie Onassis was married to John F. Kennedy, the 35th president of the United States, I believe. At a young age, she studied French and art history and also was a talented writer. At 18 years old, she won a essay contest for Vogue magazine and won first place in that essay contest against, I think, over 1,200 entries. And because of that, she won an internship at the Vogue office. The interesting thing was, her first day on the job there, she ended up quitting because there was not enough prominent men in the office. And that did not fit her vision or her goals. So I don't know quite what to make of that. I'm just reporting what is written in the book. She then ended up working for the Washington Times as a quote-unquote inquiring camera girl. So this was a column where it was basically a man on the street column where she's going around towns, probably around the Washington, D.C. area, and questioning, regular Joes about current issues of the day. And so that was a pretty successful column, and she was able to get some prominence because of the popularity of that article. It was about a year and a half later that she met John F. Kennedy, as he was an up-and-coming congressman. She was engaged at the time when she met John F. Kennedy. She was engaged to a guy named John G.W. Husted Jr., who was a stockbroker. And according to the internet source I found, she called off the engagement with John Husted Jr. after learning how little money he made. And so then she gave the ring back basically to John Husted and got engaged to John F. Kennedy. JCB then goes into kind of all of the tragedies that Jackie Onassis had to, I would say, suffer through over the next few years. So obviously the most famous was the assassination of John F. Kennedy in November of 1963. She was riding in the car right next to JFK as he was assassinated in Dallas. One of her best friends was John F. Kennedy's brother, Robert Kennedy. He was also assassinated a year or two later. While she was with JFK, she had one miscarriage, one stillborn birth, and the death of a third child only a couple days after being born. So obviously, all of these events are happening within a year or two period, and it's really hard to imagine kind of the grief and suffering that's happening during this time. But Jon Collins-Black emphasizes that Jackie Onassis, displayed great strength, and then ended up wanting to go into a little bit of seclusion and getting out of the public spotlight after all of the events are happening. All of these tragedies are happening in her life. And she ended up marrying Aristotle Onassis, and he ended up passing away from cancer a number of years later after their marriage. So again, another tragedy in her life. And so Jon Collins-Black notes that she was the first lady or former first lady that kind of re-entered the normal workforce. She went back to New York and started as an editor at Viking Press, and then a couple years later at Doubleday, so both publishing companies, and then worked at Doubleday for 16 years until her death. Jackie Onassis had a passion for history preservation, and she was the one that created the White House Historical Association. She also helped save the New York City Grand Central Station, which was slated for demolition, and she led the charge and was able to end up preserving the Grand Central Station in New York City as a historical site. We then go back to Jon Collins-Black vignette. He says that the treasure is not meant to require any great hardships on us, as the stakes are not particularly high. In the lens of like Jackie Onassis's life, this hits pretty hard, I would say, just because we hear about like tragedy after tragedy in her life, and then he goes back to the theme of the chapter, which is welcome the good with the bad, and puts into perspective this treasure hunt is not meant to cause any real hardship. This is really just for joy, right? And he says that not finding the treasure should still leave us with happy memories of spending time outdoors with loved ones, and is designed to bring joy, not suffering. And then JCB talks a little bit more about tragedy as a part of everybody's life, and it's unavoidable. But having the perspective of knowing that's the case, making sure you are taking the good with the bad and enjoying the euphoria and joy when it is present. He also says Jackie seemed to travel along each one of her paths open to the road ahead. She did not stray the course away from things that brought her joy. And with her editing career, she started as an editor and ended her career as an editor, and quote unquote, she had come full circle. That is about it for a summary of the chapter. You guys have questions or comments? Anything I missed there?
I think that was a good summary.
All right. Thoughts? Or should we just dive into FFPNs, Forrest Fenn Picked Nuggets?
I would be down to get into nuggets. Do you feel any different, Cody?
No, I'd say the one kind of thought I did have was I found a few different references just in reading things and trying to track down the treasure that I thought, I don't know if JCB would really include this because it just seems kind of sad.
Yeah.
I feel like he's trying to keep it like an upbeat treasure hunt. And after reading this chapter, I'm like, maybe I should be open to more of these kind of sadder things, because this was a pretty sad chapter.
No, I honestly felt the same way. It's like, I don't think there should be clues associated with all of these tragedies. And so I
Yeah.
kind of kept my focus on the first vignette and the summarization, I would say, at the end, more so than the content of Jackie Onassis's life, I would say.
Yeah.
Overall, I was not very satisfied with my nuggets in this chapter. So I'm hoping you guys found some goodies that maybe I passed over.
Mine's going to be very hit or miss. I'm really excited about it, and you guys are either going to also be excited or just be like, what was that? That's
Right.
nothing.
Well, I think you should lead us off then.
I'll lead you off. All right.
Okay.
Wow.
Good job, Cody. All right.
Thank you. I
Lead
can
us
hear it
off.
better for some reason this time.
Yeah, I turned on original sound for musicians on, and I'm going to turn it back off so you don't hear my keyboard typing. Continue.
Excellent. All right. FFPN, Forrest Fenn Picked Nugget. Actually, I'll just a quick recap in case anyone's not aware. The Forrest Fenn Picked Nugget is a little exercise we do at the end of every chapter where we all pick our favorite thing. We haven't told each other yet. And then I think the idea is if 2 or 3 of us pick the same one, then we have extra confidence that it's meant to be a clue. So my FFPN, and this one, again, you guys might hate it. I'm going with the E's in the subtitle. So I read through, and I probably should have pulled up a picture for this. I know you guys both have your books with you. So chapter 1 and chapter 10 are the only chapters where he has these weird disconnected E's in the subtitle handwriting. What does it mean? I have no idea. But the more I think about it, the more it bugs me for it to not be a clue. Because I read through every single one of these little handwritten subtitles, and there's obviously E's the most common letter in the alphabet, so there's tons of E's. Every single one of his E's is like what I would consider a normal E in cursive, where it swoops around. But in chapter 1, and in this chapter here, for some reason, he does these E's that, like, the bottom part's cursive, and then he comes back after the fact to close the E, and they're like not completely connected. And it's bugging me. At first, I'm like, oh, whatever. But it's bugging me because it's like, if you made a mistake with the E and that's not your normal handwriting, you just rewrite it, right? I mean, this is like a permanent book. You want it to be right. You're not gonna be like, oh, I kind of messed that E up. I'm just gonna go back and fix it now, especially twice on this one.
Right.
And then once on chapter 1. So it's like, it seems so insignificant, and I kind of thought it was insignificant and wrote it as like one of the bottom of my list for the Forrest Fenn Picked Nuggets, but it's just been eating away at me. Why did he do that?
Interesting.
I think what's driving me crazy looking at just page 96 is like the E in welcome is normal, but then the 2 thes, the E's are not.
Yes, both E's in
connected.
welcome are normal. And I looked at every E in every subtitle, and they're all normal, except for chapter 1 and chapter 10. He's got these weird E's. And it's not like a weird slip up he wouldn't notice, because he would have had to have picked his pen up and go back to finish them.
Yeah.
It's so insignificant that it's driving me nuts.
Yeah, that is weird.
Right, we got to employ Cody as the handwriting analyst for the FBI, it's seemingly here.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, it seems like nothing, but then you start like trying to think to yourself, just like as you're going about your day, like, why would he do that? Why would he not just rewrite it? And it just starts to drive you more and more nuts.
Yeah, because the E's that aren't connected don't even look like the same flow
Yeah.
as the other E's that are right. Like it would have to be like a pause in his writing.
Yeah. And it's like, even if he did it like 50% of the time, it's like, okay, he just does this weird little tick in his writing, but he does it on 3 E's out of like 50. And it's just in chapter 1 and then 2 times in chapter 10. Color me suspicious.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, just weird. What do I do with it? I don't know. Maybe someone else will know. But I've drawn attention to it now, and I hope someone finds something, because it's kind of messing with my head.
Are those notched E's?
Maybe.
Are they inclusions?
Inclusions are notched E's. Hmm.
All right. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I had actually done a quick look at the handwriting actually probably a couple weeks ago and didn't look at it as closely as this actually and did not come up with that or anything for that matter with the handwriting here, but good find, Cody. I like that very much.
Thank you. I really hope someone writes in about it because it's gonna drive me nuts.
All right. Bryn, do you want to do yours?
Sure. So I wrote down actually just like I had a lot of quotes that really stuck out to me as potential clues. However, this one thing in particular I feel like has the most depth for the sake of uh, this segment. So the picture on page 98 is Jackie with her daughter Caroline. And I don't know what inspired me to do this, but I just did like a reverse Google image search of this photo to see what it brought up. And it turns out that it's a picture of them at Hyannis Port in Cape Cod, which is where the Kennedys spent a lot of time. They had like their vacation home there out in Cape Cod. And the first thing that stuck out to me is the the reverse image, like the caption that came up with this actual photo, said that they were at the lighthouse there. So that was interesting to me because we've seen the lighthouse theme come up a couple times. We kind of have been keeping an eye out for like breeze of the ocean, windy location, shoreline. So that initially stood out as curious. And then I looked into the lighthouse a little bit more. John H. Lothrop was appointed the keeper of the lighthouse in 1871, and his nickname was Pilot John. So I don't know, just a connection, like aviation connection that we've been pulling through the book. And then he eventually handed off those duties to his son. So then we had kind of a multi-generational aspect to that as well. And I guess that part, both of these all of these coincidences could be just that. I don't think it would be particularly unusual for, at that time, a father to hand off those duties to his son. And the last interesting thing I picked up with that picture is it's actually part of a series of, I believe, 4 pictures that were published of this situation. And in other pictures, you can see that they are actually reading a children's book together. So in this picture itself, you can see that book just laying down flat in front of them, but in the other pictures, they have it up and they're reading together. So I know earlier in the book, we had quotes from the children's book's authors, JCB's connection to Our Unbreakable Thread, the children's book that he wrote. So I don't know, I guess the more I looked into this picture itself, the more interesting it became. But I think, I don't know if these are clues or if it is just things that likely could have been the situation regardless. So that's what I have as my main contribution for this segment.
Very nice.
Yeah,
It's
I
funny
like
that Blake said he doesn't. His gut feeling is that there's not going to be clues in the sad text, the tragic text, and both of our FFPNs were not in the text. Coincidence of the day.
Coincidence of the day. All right. Yeah. Like I said, I'm not too satisfied with mine. I'm just going to pull out one quote here. The magnetism of her appearance when he's talking about Jackie Onassis. So I don't know, thinking about compasses, thinking about metals. We've been thinking about, the boxes quite a bit. Maybe that has to do with something, but I think I'm in the same boat as you guys right now is like, what does that mean? What does it apply to? I'm unsatisfied. It's just a quote that stuck out to me. So sorry, everyone, for the poor FFPN from Blake today.
I have
Right in with your complaints.
I have other quots that I thought were really interesting if you want me to just read those off.
Let's
I
hear
do
some,
too. You want to go back and forth?
Some flakes.
Yeah.
I do too. Rapid fire
Yeah,
flakes
okay.
here. Okay.
Okay, so the first quote was history preservation was important to Jackie Onassis while at the White House. She created the White House Historical Association. It remains in existence today as a free public resource. This association provides educational information about it to anyone who wants to learn. So I think the anyone who wants to learn was kind of to me, felt like a nudge from JCB to be like, hey, check this out. Yeah, do some additional research in this body of information, and maybe you can come across some clues. So I don't know if that could tie in this, like where to dive in deeper on a later chapter, or something else I'm not thinking about.
I like that.
Yeah, that's a good one. I had another quote. She had come full circle.
Mm-hmm.
Next quote.
Not a full circle like Cody's E's.
What's your thought process behind the she had come full circle?
I don't know. We've talked about arcs and things like that.
Directional.
You've been looking at too many O's in that word search.
Yeah.
No, it stood out. I think it's good. I think it's good.
No, I do too. Well, yeah. I don't know. It didn't stand out to me as much, but I do like it.
Is that not the favorite thing you've heard me say today?
It's not my favorite thing I've heard you say all day.
Cody,
all right, here's another one. I'm sure you guys picked up on this one. Today I have one tattoo. It runs down my left forearm. It is written in Sanskrit. I read some other stuff talking about cryptography, and in it, the first thing it said was one of the first things you do is you need to figure out what language it's in. That's like step one of deciphering a cryptogram. I know that one of the things I looked into for the word search in part 2 was Latin, because there was so much of the what's the book with the Oasis, Ready Player One talk.
Yeah.
And one of the clues in Ready Player One, I think like the first solve was that it was a Latin phrase. So I looked for Latin stuff in there, and then kind of in some other parts of the book. So now I'm also looking for Sanskrit stuff, I guess. Seems like if it's important enough to him to be his one tattoo, and the fact that he's mentioning that he has just one tattoo, it could be a nod to just like doubling down on the phrase that it means, which is kind of also the theme of the chapter, but it could also be, you know, a strong association with the Sanskrit language. Oh, and then this one I looked into a little bit. I think that Sapphire in chapter 1, the name of the place that's engraved on it is in Sanskrit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Fact check me on that.
Cody is our resident language expert in Sumerian and Sanskrit. Right in with your Sumerian translations, Cody.
And English ease.
No, that's great. Yeah, no, I didn't dive into that one. I just pulled the quote from Wikipedia about what Sanskrit was, so that's as far as I got. So I'm glad you looked into that a bit more. Bryn, your turn.
Yes. This is about her Vogue internship.
Mm-hmm.
She was selected from 1,279 candidates.
Cody, what region is that from the plain zones?
I'll look into it.
Just seemed like a very unusual, precise number to include. For him to like have tracked that down, or it just happened to be in the research he was doing. But I think for me, I would have just said over 1,000 candidates. So
yeah, I agree. That's a good call. I like that one a lot. That's my favorite thing you've said all day.
Wow, thank you. Honored.
When talking about his dad talking to him and consoling him after the football game, he says, next season you'll have a chance for a different experience. So again, going back to seasons, or I guess just going back to seasons. I have no idea what you do with that. And it's I guess a quote from his dad. Seems hard to be able to use that maybe, but caught my eye.
I've got one. Short of words, we can offer a hand upon a shoulder or a warm embrace. Small things such as these can lead to outsized rewards. Again, terms about treasure or outsized rewards always catch my eye. I did some looking into like, literary references or artworks or anything about hands on shoulders. Nothing definitive yet.
There was another hand reference right after that too, right at the end of the chapter, and I'm looking for it now. Oh, I can't find it, but I wrote down hand theme.
All right, we'll put
Excellent.
hands in our theme.
This is the content people tune in for. Hand theme.
It was just a flake, not a nugget.
Right.
I think this is my last one. Am I getting cut off?
No.
No, I've got one more too.
Okay. Yet Jackie chose to remain flexible in order to sustain. Pliability is an integral part of resilience. Our path may alter, but our purpose and posture remain the same. So I think any time he mentions path, it stands out to me. I think just when we think about trails and like you are physically having to follow a path, in theory, to find this treasure, the roadmap connection to chapter 1. So yeah, path always stands out.
Similar vein of thought, Jackie seemed to travel along each one with her eyes open to the road ahead. She did not stray the course away from the things that brought her joy.
Yeah.
All right. I've got one. It's going to sound like I'm joking. I promise I'm not. I read it, thought this in my head, laughed a little bit to myself, and then was gonna pass it and not write it down. But then I thought, it's situations like these where I think it's a joke and something like clicks in my head. And I'm like, haha, that's a funny thing. And then I pass up on it that later it comes back and it's like, oh, that was actually something. I never would have guessed that's actually something. It just seemed like a joke. If you were gonna write, if you were gonna write 2 sentences in a book and you wanted to get the theme of Chinese food
Okay, yeah.
to your reader,
I know where you're going with this, actually.
each of us know there is both sweet and sour in the human experience. All of us meet with fortune and disappointment as we pursue the things we desire. I read that and just thought, Chinese food, laughed to myself, kept going, and then thought, it's situations like these where it's actually something, and I just laughed it off. So, do I think it's something? No, but I'm putting it out there.
All right. I did catch the sweet and sour. I did not make the connection to fortune right after that. Very interesting. Good, Cody.
That is interesting. I didn't pick up on that at all.
Right.
And now I kind of want Chinese food.
Okay, so I think that's everybody's flakes. Is that right? Cool.
A lot of flakes on this one.
A lot of flakes.
Picked Nuggets has really got out of hand.
Yeah, sorry. We'll try to keep it limited next time, but I guess we had
okay.
a lot of things.
No, I think it's more important to touch on anything that could potentially be interesting than to overlook it.
Okay. All right, Cody, do you want to talk about themes to wrap up this episode? Any theme connections you want to talk about?
Yeah, we'll go through our list real quick. 60 seconds. See if we go through a list of recurring themes and see if they came up in this one. Music. I don't remember anything. Fatherhood, obviously, yes. Wind. I don't think so. World's Fair, no. Transcending circumstances. TM.
That's good. I didn't think about that in this context.
Yeah.
Not
because it's not really like going from loss to, I don't know.
Well,
we're trying not to use the term rags to riches, right? So it's not that.
Right. It's transcending circumstances. So it is, because
I would
the amount
yes.
of tragedy that we cover, hit after hit after hit, and then she still has a successful career. Maybe that is the transcending circumstance there.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Is it's not in the same vein as the other chapters, but it still is transcending circumstance.
Yes, absolutely. Good point.
Flowers / botanical. I don't remember anything. Water, salt water. Just Bryn's photo link from her FFPN. That's it.
Okay, so yeah, I was considering using this for my FFPN, but I couldn't figure out why it would be a clue. But there is a theme in this one of feminism. And the reason I say that is kind of Jackie Onassis as a person was, a woman in high power. But it goes back to the 2 quotes actually at the beginning of the book, beginning of the chapter. The first is by Bernard Williams, who I mentioned was an English philosopher. He was not a labeled feminist, but as close as possible is kind of what the Wikipedia article I read said. So he is a near feminist, let's say, in his some of his philosophical writings. And then Sherry Eldew also has some connections to feminism. Sorry, let me find exactly what the connection was there. Hold.
I'll say while you're looking for it, it reminds me of the Amelia Earhart chapter 2 and her foundation or association about advancing women in flight.
Yes. Absolutely. So Sherry Eldew is a motivational author and leader who has spoken quite a bit about women's leadership and the potential of women and girls. And there was one more note in this too, but I won't waste more time. Anyway, there's a feminism connection here based on the 2 quotes that start this chapter. We have, I guess you're saying that came across in the Amelia Earhart chapter, but anyway, just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I think that's a good one to keep an eye out for. Good
All right.
call.
Thank you, everybody. That is an episode talking about Jackie Onassis's Diamond Sapphire Brooch. I think that's it. Have a good night, everybody.
Searching for clues, let's find you. Left